The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Robert Jakowski, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today, we're excited to have you join us for this topic, 7 dramatic ways to accelerate revenue growth for your company and for yourself. As we do with every webinar that we conduct, we're going to record today's webinar in the event you want to listen to it later, in the event that you want to share with colleagues. We want to make sure that you've got these 7 best practices to apply to your company, to share, to leverage, and to fully give yourself the full opportunity to maximize your revenue growth this year. As we do with every webinar that you attend, please participate. We've got some polls today. We've got Q&A. So if you have questions, we've got answers. Please go ahead and post those to the chat as we go throughout today. And we'll make sure that we get through them all today. And if we run out of time because of our large, diverse audience today, I'll make sure that we get back to you as soon as possible, either this evening or in writing sometime today. But again, thank you and welcome, everyone. Let's start off, if we could, about where you are today and what's holding you back from accelerating your revenue growth today. So if you'd be kind enough to participate in these polls, we'd really appreciate it. Let me go ahead and select the first one. So let's launch this. So what's holding you back today? And again, choose one of the above. One may be that you're not getting the revenue growth you want because your sales cycles are too long. Another one would be, of course, that you don't have enough demand for your solution or for your services. Another may be that you need more compelling value propositions. Perhaps you've got messaging, but it's not resonating with your target audience. The fourth area would be that you don't have the internal resources to get the job done. So you've got the vision, you've got the goals, but you don't have the resources. And of course, the fifth would be that you are in a situation where you've got a solution or a service, but you need to do a better job proving out ROI and the value that you're going to deliver to your customers and partners. So go ahead, if everybody would, and participate in this, and I'll show the results here in a couple of seconds. But always appreciate your advice as we go through this process, and we'll make sure we tailor our webinar today based upon your requirements, based upon your input. Okay. So just a couple more seconds here. And again, thank you very much for everybody for participating. And let's go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results. Okay, 27% of you stated that your challenge today is your sales cycles are taking too long. 36% of you stated that you don't have enough demand for your solution or services. 27% stated that you don't have the internal resources to get the job done. And marketing, by the way, is very broad. Marketing, sales, business development. So sometimes it's very difficult to cover all your bases. And then 9% stated that you have to do a better job proving out ROI and your value delivered. So perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. Let me go ahead and hide that information. And we will move on now. Thank you. Okay. Let's talk about next steps here. And what I'd like to do is perhaps share with you a little bit about who we are today as a company, because I think it's valuable to give some context before we talk about best practices. And just make sure we close this poll. Perfect. When Craig Ramey and I created On-Demand Advisors 15 years ago, we built it specifically to be a revenue acceleration partner for B2B companies. And what that means basically is we start with strategy. Strategy really is the most important part of what you need to do to build your company, to grow your company, to scale and succeed. So starting with strategy, not only what do you want to achieve in terms of revenue growth, but what type of markets do you want to conquer? What type of customers do you want to have? How do you want to scale the company? How much of that will be direct versus indirect? There are a lot of variables that go into strategy. We also have created a whole host of best practices and innovations that we're going to share with you today and in the future. These are best practices that eliminate a lot of the guesswork that you have today when you're thinking about scaling your revenue growth, because we're all after doing that in a capital efficient way. We also do a lot of coaching for the companies that we work with. We typically will work with many management teams, large companies, small companies, startup companies, mid-stage companies that need to scale. And really, it's about helping them implement, execute, and achieve results. So that leads us to something that we've created that we're going to talk about, which is our revenue operating system. But before we do that, we suffice to say the best practices we're going to share with you today, the 7 different ones we're going to talk about, regardless of your size, these will apply to your company and help you in terms of your growth. As I looked at many of the companies that have registered for today's webinar, some of you are software development companies. And one of the things I find with software development companies, for instance, there may be today in the United States 6,000 software development companies and many more global companies beyond that. One of the things that we typically do when we work with companies like this is help in terms of differentiation. You've heard about Jeffrey Moore and the red ocean, blue ocean, I believe, and you'll find that many companies we work with are swimming in a red ocean. It's very competitive. There are a lot of options. And so one of the things that we always try to do when we engage with the client is help make them unique, create unique value, hone them in terms of being a leader in the market, and we'll decide what the market is. But really find how they're going to stand out and be a leader in that space. Some of you are joining us from CRM companies. So you're working with companies that provide robust CRM or sales solutions. And so one of the things I love about CRM is that I had the pleasure of building a CRM company as one of the executives a number of years ago, and we took the company public, and then the company got acquired. But it's a great space, and there's so much opportunity for CRM companies. Now, there are about 5,000 CRM companies out there today, so many of them are focused on niches and have special requirements, maybe verticals like pharma. And so what you're really looking for is how you're going to differentiate your value. Now, some of you also that registered for today's webinar are coming from talent management or recruiting agencies. So being able to really recruit, train, onboard, and excel in terms of talent management is something that we've helped many companies do too. And finally, I noticed one of our groups that's joining for today's webinar are coming from an energy management solution provider market. And that was one of the areas I've been fortunate, having been CEO, COO for many different companies in Silicon Valley. One of the companies that I was a chief operating officer was a company called Silicon Energy, and we built a very robust enterprise energy management platform that was used both by the providers and consumers, which was eventually acquired by Itron. So I love the diversity of what you bring to the table, the companies that are represented here today, and look forward to continuing some strategic conversations about how you're moving your company forward in terms of their growth path. Now, when I was the CEO at Intact, a software as a service company, and Craig was the chief marketing officer, we started building out this, what we call operating model. And many of you will recognize this as the 7 different panels. The purple is the strategic panels. So you got the 3 funnels, marketing, lead development, and sales on the bottom. We've got the strategic area we're going to talk about today, which is strategic insights to find the truth for your clients. The red is marketing, marketing execution. How are you going to put in the robust engine that's going to create the demand for your company and scale that? The yellow is sales, sales onboarding, sales execution, and sales excellence. And of course, green is all about partnerships. So we help companies implement their revenue acceleration operating model. And this is really a set of best practices that can be honed and scaled for your company. All right, so that's a little bit about on-demand advisors and what we do. Let's talk about the 7 dramatic ways to accelerate revenue growth. And I'm going to go into each one of these and in some cases give you very specific examples. The first is creating all the demand you require. So how do you create all the demand that you require? Because you need to do that as you scale. This is the flywheel that's going to get your company moving forward. The second dramatic way we're going to talk about is eliminating costly experimentation. A lot of chief executives that I know, a lot of executives in general, spend a lot of time trying out different things in terms of demand generation and creating demand for their company. Many of those don't work or provide the results that are anticipated. So there needs to be a better path to eliminate that type of experimentation. The third way to dramatically accelerate your revenue growth is to start acting as the leader, not as a participant, but truly the leader in your space. And we'll talk about what that means. The fourth is we're going to show with you today a way that you can accelerate your sales process by at least 33%. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I always like to do is reduce the size of the sales cycle. That was from our poll today that we started with. One of the key areas that you asked for is that your sales cycles are too long. So we're going to show you a demonstrable way that you can actually reduce your sales cycle and subsequently your cost of sales. The fifth is your champion. Every time there is a buying opportunity, there has to be a champion involved from the buyer side. And your sales team needs to equip that champion. So we're going to discuss what that means. The sixth is developing and delivering your business case. So when somebody's going to make an investment in your service, in your solution, they want to know what the ROI is going to be. And then the seventh area we're going to talk about is how to accelerate the close. So some really significant, important ways that you can dramatically accelerate revenue growth. Let's talk about the first one. This is putting in what we call revenue acceleration engine. So too often when I work with executives, they're looking for the silver bullet, as we call it, for demand creation. They're looking for a specific program. Let's say it's a program with LinkedIn. They're looking for a specific company. Let's say it's going to be a call box in the Philippines making outbound calls. They're looking for a very specific bullet that's going to get them there. And I can tell you from experience, there is no silver bullet, but there is a way to get there. And we call it the revenue acceleration engine. So what we're going to do is walk you through these areas, these components that make up the engine. The other thing that's important to take away is that the revenue creation area is a process. It's a connected process. It starts with marketing, goes through sales, and into client services. It's the same thing when you look at partnerships and business development. So what you really need is a scalable engine for demand creation. So let's quickly talk about the different components here. Well, the first that we're going to talk about is implementing your intentional revenue acceleration model. And let me share with you this slide here. Let's say you wanted to increase your revenue in a specific area of new customer acquisition this year by an additional $4 million. So we know that if your average transaction or your ACV is 100,000, you're going to need 40 of those, which is over here on the right-hand side. Now, we also know that most of you know what your conversion rate is in terms of closing a sale from a sales opportunity to close. In this case, it's 25%. The key, though, to making this model work is the first two funnels. If you can create those first two funnels, you can fill the last funnel. So the first one is marketing. How are you going to create all the demand that you need for the market qualified leads? In this case, you need to create 133 market qualified leads per month. And then those leads need to be converted into sales opportunities, sales accepted leads. And so for most B2B companies, it's about 10%. And sometimes you can improve on that ratio, sometimes not. But that means you're going to need to create and convert of those MQLs 13 into sales opportunities per month, and to close 3.4 on average per month to make your numbers. This is math. This is great because this is intentionality. That's the first part. The second part we're going to talk about is creating what we call outcome-focused messaging. So outcome-focused messaging, and we'll get to that infographic a little bit later, is really thinking about what are the outcomes, the ROI that you're delivering for your client. A lot of companies speak at a very tactical level, and they have an opportunity to speak at a more strategic level because that's what decision makers want. They want engagement that's going to help drive their business. And how are you going to be able to do that? So we're going to talk about moving up the elevators to that strategic outcome. The third component in this engine is validating through buyer intelligence. When we think about all the assumptions we have about our audience, the pains that they have, the challenges that they're trying to address, the value propositions that we offer, the offers that we could make, it's a lot of different things that we could do. The question is, what is prioritized and resonates with your audience? So there's a way to eliminate that guesswork. The next one is reaching 100% of your audience. So reach is really important because if you have a great service, you have a great solution, you need to reach the audience because you don't know what percentage of that target audience are going to buy from you today. The next is implementing what we call revenue acceleration infrastructure. That is your CRM, marketing automation system, and your sales enablement solution. And there's other components that get involved in that, but it needs to be streamlined to meet your needs. The sixth on here is mapping the buyer's journey. The seventh, and we'll talk about that further, is delivering your buyer engagement offers. The eighth is choosing the right channels to reach your buyer. And then the ninth is measuring conversions, ROI, and adjusting each and every quarter. So when you put this engine in, what we found is you get dramatic results. Now, as we said, we've been doing this for about 15 years, and we become very serial, very good at doing this over and over again. So we perfected the process to eliminate a lot of the guesswork. So the engine is the first way we start in terms of best practices for today's webinar. The second is also truly important, which is eliminating a lot of the costly experimentation that most people have that waste time and money. So the objective is, let's get to the truth quickly. And how do you do that? Well, the first is apply market intelligence. So a lot of times when we work with a client, we'll actually conduct a market strategy work with them. And the purpose is to really look at all the addressable markets that they can go after and to determine what's happening in those markets that's going to help them either penetrate those markets or inhibit them. Because what you're really looking at is a prioritization of the markets or segments you're going to target to penetrate and win. The second part of intelligence is competition. What we always find a lot of times is that there is a perception sometimes that there's virgin markets out there. And usually what we find when we analyze those markets is there are undiscovered markets out there. So one of the things that we like to look at is how does your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, obviously called SWOT, how does your SWOT beat your competitor's SWOT? And more importantly, how do you create the competitive battle cards that your sales team or your partner organizations are going to need from you to actually go win? The third, and this is the one I would really take away for everybody today, is buyer intelligence. Find the truth from your buyer so that you can prioritize your messaging, your positioning, and your offers. We've done hundreds of these buyer intelligence surveys, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but it really helps our client focus in on what's important from the buyer, because ultimately that's how you can eliminate some of this expensive guesswork. And then last is building out use cases and validating those with your target audience. This is especially true as companies are integrated artificial intelligence. They're looking at new services that they want to launch. Perhaps you're in the Internet of Things and you've built a great solution, but you haven't fully vetted out all the use cases. So this is a great way to do that. So the second key takeaway from today's webinar is have a path to eliminate costly experimentation so that you can get to the truth quickly. Now, one of those that we talked about is buyer intelligence. So a lot of times what we'll do when we sit down with a client is we'll put together a strategic messaging workshop, conduct that first to really flesh out all of the messaging, both tactical and strategic, that you offer. Then what we'll do is we'll actually engage 30, 50, sometimes hundreds of decision makers in your target audience to actually go through the survey process with you to come up with a statistically relevant way to look at the information that you have. What you're really trying to figure out is, let's say you have 20 value propositions. How do they rank? How would you order them based upon your buyer's input? And then how did you marry this information together with what's happening in your industry and challenges and trends so that you can take advantage of that and create what we call a core messaging document? This output becomes the messaging Bible, if you will, for your website, for your sales teams, for your partners, and for all stakeholders. Okay, so that's the second area, which is really about eliminating costly experimentation. Let's now talk about the third area, the best practice. This is something that typically you don't hear much about, which is acting like the leader. A lot of companies out there don't act like the leader. They act as a participant in a market. But what we found is that very often we can work with companies to actually help them become thought leaders for their target audience. Just as we are today. I mean, if you think about what we are today, on-demand advisors, we are revenue acceleration experts. It's what we do. We've done it with hundreds of companies, and we really have created a set of best practices that we can apply and eliminate a lot of experimentation. You can do the same thing with the markets that you serve too. So what we're really looking at doing here is thinking about becoming a thought leader. And sometimes you don't have to look at a huge, wide audience. Sometimes you can start with a niche audience and become a thought leader for that audience. The second thing to act like a leader is presenting your strategic value, the outcomes, the ROIs that your decision makers want. And one of the more interesting ones that we find is presenting your value visually. People today are visual. People want to see infographics. They want to see videos. They want to see interactivity that allows them to capture the essence of who you are and what you can do very quickly. And then finally, you want to become an innovator in your industry. So there are a lot of ways to do that, but these four areas all combine to help you act as a leader. Now, one of those things that we talked about is moving up this spectrum, if you will, to what we call outcome-focused messaging. So a lot of companies do just a fine job talking about their capabilities, features, functions, capabilities, which is level number one. Then what you want to think about doing is moving up this spectrum to talk about business challenges that your audience has And how do you address that with the right value propositions? What we normally call the headache and the aspirin, if you will. The next area up in terms of value optimization is about looking at the business process that you're going to optimize for your clients, for your customers, and the value you're going to deliver. And then finally, moving up one step further, it's about what are the outcomes that you're going to deliver, which, by the way, ultimately is what the decision makers want from you, and the return on investment that you're going to deliver. So this is helping companies think through and how do they migrate from where they are today to the areas of greatest value. Okay. Now, these are a couple of different visual process infographics that we created. One of our clients is Cavinci, a leader in financial applications and coaching for performance tools. And as you can see here, what we're doing here is we're allowing them to think about how does Cavinci map the information from all these different disparate accounting solutions, put that into the platform, integrate that, pull all the information together, map it to a standard chart of accounts, provide the business intelligence that they're looking for, and then continue to move down this path in terms of financial insights that everybody understands. When you look at this process infographic, you can see immediately the value that Cavinci is going to be able to deliver for your organization if you have lots of different units out there, such as restaurants, hospitality, retail, franchise. So this is part of that process. Another thing that we wanted to do in terms of a process infographic is to show the set of performance tools, coaching for performance tools that are offered by Cavinci to their target audiences. And of course, if you got wellness dashboards, KPI scorecards, benchmarking and comparison, these become really important when you have a lot of different business units that you're trying to figure out how to coach for performance and improve that. But again, this is another way to do it visually. So these are just a couple different ways that we do this. We showed an infographic for our own company, which is the revenue acceleration system, but you get very quickly the value that is being created. All right, let's talk about the fourth best practice. How do you accelerate the sales process by 33% or more? And if you can do that, you can also slash your cost of sales, which is really important today as we move into a subscription-based world where people are parsing out their purchase in subscriptions. And what you need to be able to do then, of course, is accelerate that sales process because your break-even analysis may be lower today than it was in the past. So how do you do that? What would be the one main vehicle that you could use to accelerate your sales process? Well, we talk about something that we created at On Demand Advisors called a sales-driven website. It's a true innovation that we provided that nobody else in the marketplace really offers today. Most companies today, and I would bet your company today, has a really good informational website. You can go there, you can get a lot of information and so forth. What we wanted to do with the sales-driven website instead is to guide every visitor that came to the website through the buying process. We also wanted to convert visitors into prospects, and we wanted to be able to replicate what we call the in-person sales and buying experience with the offline or online experience that you have on the website. So think about this. Let's say you're going to be presenting to Raytheon, and there are, let's say, 25 people that will be involved in the decision-making process. When half of those people come to your presentation, the other half can't make it, and they come to your website. What you need to be able to do is to walk them through the same intelligence, the same steps, the same knowledge that you do in person. And that's really being able to take them through that process. Finally, you need to be able to customized by your buyer's journey. Every buyer has a journey that they want to go through. You could do it by title. So, for instance, when we were at Intech, we had different buyer's journeys for the CFO, for the controller, and for the different heads of the different financial departments, like accounts payable, payroll, and so forth. You could do it by industry. So when ICUC works with us, they have 12 different industries that we're going to take people through to understand how to apply their social media management services. And so we're going to take them through that same process. With Technical Toolbox, another client of ours, we're going to take them by solution because they offer a really great array of solutions for engineers in the oil and gas industry. Now, a sales-driven website is going to help you accelerate the strategic or consultative sale if you're looking at the type of sales process that you have today. It also can help you complete transactional sales. So for instance, we talked about, and here again is the value of the sales-driven website. It's all about accelerating the buying process. What we find is that Gartner would tell you today that a good portion of the sales process is already accomplished by the time your buyer engages with a salesperson or account executive. That means there's a lot of work that needs to be done with your website to enable that front-end education, preference setting, and acceleration of your buying process digitally that perhaps you didn't do before. Technical Toolboxes is one of our clients, and like we talked about, we've created a sales-driven website for them. But here's two ways you can navigate through their process. One is you can come in and say, I want to do it by title. So if I'm an integrity or risk management engineer, I want to see what's the process you take me through. What's the overview of what you offer to me? What challenges do you help me address today? What are the solutions that Technical Toolboxes provides to integrity and risk management engineers? What are frequently asked questions? Who are clients just like us in our industry? And then what next steps should I take with you? Now, that's one buyer's journey based upon title or role. Another one that you could easily have is based upon solution. So one of their solutions that they offer is the pipeline hub. So if you think about that hub for the engineers, what is that hub? What are the challenges that it helps the engineering organizations solve? Solutions, FAQs, clients, and next steps. So this is transformational. It's not. You have to rip and replace. For most of us, when we work with an existing website, it's about taking that website and organizing the information so it's meaningful, targeted, and will accelerate the buying process for each of your buyers. Let's talk about the fifth area where you can actually dramatically increase and accelerate revenue growth. This is what we call equipping your champion and your sales team for success. The most important part of this is the prescriptive buying process. So when you map out the buying process, and this could be sales process, it could be the buying process, typically there's an awareness that happens. And at this stage, you're going to develop some knowledge about the solution or your service. There'll be a qualification to see whether there's a good fit. There's going to be a proof step to prove the value, prove how you're going to address the issues. There's going to be a proposal stage, negotiation, and close. Now, what we've done is we create a unique buyer's journey for each client that we work with, and we think about what are the sales tools you're going to need, both from the sales side and also from a buyer perspective, for the champion perspective, to actually move through this process. So you can see at the front end here, at the very front, at the very top of the funnel, we may need a solution overview. We may need a buyer's guide. We may need an explainer video. We may need to have fully developed use cases. We may need to provide thought leadership webinars. These are really great top of funnel tools and offers you're going to need. As you move down the process, though, you're going to be more focused on what's the ROI? How do we get started? What are some of the best practices that are going to help guide us through this process? Or some customer or industry success stories. So here are 3 different buyer's guides that we've created for our clients. And we do this, by the way, for every client. If I am talking to visibility software and one of our clients, and they provide talent management solutions, basically what we need to do is help them create a buyer's guide that they could be using for their target audiences, because most buyers don't know how to evaluate, buy, and what criteria they should be using to buy that type of talent management solution. If I'm over here at Cavinci and I'm a franchise, I do need a financial solution that's going to roll up all of my different franchise units into one location and then start providing me with the insights, the dashboards, the intelligence, and the coaching tools I'm going to need across all those franchises. So what I need here is I need a different buyer's guide. This is just one example of how you can actually help accelerate the process for your buyer and help substantiate the differentiated value that you're going to offer to them. So that was number 5, which is equipping your champion and, by the way, your sales team with the right sales tools. The 6th area we want to talk about is delivering your business case proactively. So the one thing that I think many companies make a mistake on is they think that their buyer is going to be able to justify their investment on their own. And if somebody hasn't purchased your type of service or solution before, they don't even know how to justify it. So this is where, if companies don't get proactive, if you don't be proactive in terms of helping put that model together, you put yourself at risk, because they may have interest, but they don't have means. And they can't get means if they don't have a bona fide ROI business case that you're going to provide to them. So one of the ways to really eliminate this competitor we call do nothing is to do the work with them. So we create with our clients ROI guides. How would you cost justify your solution for that organization? There are models that we help create. So for instance, on the ROI guides, here's 3 examples. Again, how would you cost justify this talent management solution? Another customer is Transpira, that provides operational performance management solutions. How would you justify that? And of course, over here is Cavinci. Each of these ROI guides really helps set the stage on how your buyer is going to be able to cost justify that. Another next step is to do what we call an ROI workshop. So if they know how to do that, the question is, how do you sit down with them and help put the numbers together and make sure that the buyer owns the numbers? So in this case, another one of our clients is ProdStream, and ProdStream has done a tremendous job executing these ROI workshops with their clients. Here's an example where they worked with one of their customers, Blue Origin, and were able to come up with almost a $1.5 million return on investment, immediate, that they could get from their solution. So this becomes very, very compelling. So when you think about this, ROI is knowing where to look for return, knowing how to model it, doing it in a collaborative way with a workshop, and then finally helping them do what we call put in the blueprint for realization. Because if I have a model for justification, I need to capture that value. And if I capture that value, then I'm going to be your customer for life. So that's number 6. Let's talk about number 7. Number 7 is accelerating the close. A lot of companies that we see out there today basically have this area. It's what I call the DMZ. It's the demilitarized zone, which basically says, I've done my presentation, I've done my demonstration, I've completed a lot of the things I needed to do as far as proof of value to my prospect or to my buyer, but I'm just not able to get this closed. So here's some great ideas you could apply that we help our customers apply. So the first is, we call it the Quick Start program. The Quick Start program, a lot of times is the easiest way to get to yes. So the Quick Start program, and we're going to show you an example of one, is a way for you to say, how do we get you up and running with our service or solution in 60 days? If we can do that, we can, number one, eliminate risk. Number two is we can improve value. Number three is we can improve fit. And we basically have a foundation for further deployment. So we created the Quick Start program because you may not always use it, but it's a great place to start. There's nothing worse than going through an enterprise evaluation and then finding that somebody wants to start with a proof of concept pilot. Another thing that's important is what we call the frequently asked questions guide. To address all the myriad of outstanding questions that people have, it just soaks up your time and your sales team's time to answer a lot of questions that you know are going to be asked anyway. So why not put together an FAQ guide and give that proactively to your target audience? Testimonials. Matching the right customers to prospects is a great way to do this. One of the things that Kavinci does that we help them execute is when they go to conferences, they'll actually have dinners where they'll match prospects and customers together at those dinners. That way, there's that mutual exchange that happens between those that are considering and those that are benefiting. Another thing to do is when you're done with your proof step, you've done your demonstrations, you've given your presentations and so forth. One of the things that we find and that we encourage is present your executive proposal and your agreement, subscription agreement or what have you, proactively. Use the assumptive close, because what you're really looking at doing is fleshing out any final objections that you have. But you don't wait for the close, you assume the close. And so this is, again, another great way for you to think about how to accelerate the process. Here's an example of a quick start program that we created for one of our clients. So what we needed to have here is think about this as an Internet of Things. We've got hardware involved here. We've got software, we've got services, we've got training. What we needed to do is take all these different disparate parts, put them together in a kit, and we called that the Quick Start Kit that we created for this company that provides solutions to mining companies. So all of these inventory solutions that go underneath into the mine need to be managed, and they have to have the communications, they have to have the hardware, they have to have the software, they have to have the services. And what we did is we made this very digestible so that it knew how to start. So that's one of the purposes of the Quick Start program. So I hope that's helpful for everybody today. So let's recap. We talked about, and by the way, as we go through this again, after our webinar, I'm more than happy to sit down with you and walk you through in detail how this works in practice and walk you through a customer example. So for instance, if you want to talk about a revenue acceleration engine to create all the demand that you require, there is a recipe to do that. If you want to eliminate costly experimentation, there's a way to do that. We've done that for many clients, either that want to look at prioritization of markets, want to look at adjacent markets that they should be getting into, or want to look at competition and figure out how do they eliminate competition quickly and easily and equip their sales team with these battle cards that we talked about. We talked about acting as a leader and what that means. And we talked about one of the great ways to be able to do this with your most important real estate, which is your website. How do you accelerate the sales process by at least 33%? Number 5 we talked about is equipping your champion and your sales team for success, really developing out systematically all of the sales tools that they're going to need to move that buyer through each stage of the buying process. We talked about delivering your business case proactively. I mean, there's really nothing better than that when you can deliver your business case to the buyer and make sure that they understand both the hard and soft ROI that you're delivering. And then finally, a number of different ways that you can accelerate the close. So what I like to do right now is one more poll, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So in these 7 different areas we talked about today, which best practice will you implement today based upon today's webinar? And I'm going to go ahead and execute our poll. And let's see what our choices are. Well, the first is you want to put in a demand generation engine that we talked about. Basically putting that engine in that's going to scale all of your demand. Another area that you could focus on is eliminating experimentation, perhaps with the buyer intelligence survey that you may have in terms of your messaging and how you're approaching the market today. The third area is implementing a sales-driven website. Start to guide your buyer through the buying process and eliminate a lot of the friction that may exist between the sales efforts and your buyer. The next is delivering the business case proactively. And of course, the final is better equipping your champion and your sales team with all of the best practices and tools that they're going to need to accelerate that buying process. So again, we'll keep the poll open for just a little bit longer and we'll share the results. But it's great to have these 7 dramatic ways that you can accelerate revenue. So we hope that you're taking away each of these, and we want to make sure that you have the demonstrable, not only the list of best practices, but also how to put these in place for yourself today. Okay, let me go ahead and I'll close the poll, show the results. Okay, 14% of you stated that what you want to put in place is this engine to scale demand, which is great. 29% stated you'd like to implement a sales-driven website, that transformational website to guide your buyer through the buying process and eliminate friction. 21% stated you'd like to deliver your business case proactively, and 36% stated you'd like to better equip your champion and your sales team for success. Good diversity. So appreciate that. What we'd like to do now, and thank you for sharing that, everyone, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to open this up for Q&A. So if you could, please go ahead and post your questions, and let me see how I can address all the questions that you may have today. And don't be shy. Okay. Let's see. So thank you, Nelia, for your response here. I'm glad you really enjoyed today's session. Here's a second question. Is there a place to start? So that's really a good question, because even though we've talked about 7 different areas that would provide dramatic value in terms of revenue acceleration for your company, the question we get a lot of times is, where do you start? Because there's so many different places you can start. I'd suggest a couple. One of the things we're going to talk about in our next webinar is how to create your revenue acceleration playbook. The playbook is really your strategy blueprint on how you're going to do this. So how do you think about where your company is today, and how do you move forward in this path? And in fact, next webinar, we're going to be talking about that and walking you through how to create your playbook. Another way to start is to start with a buyer intelligence survey. A survey is just a phenomenal way to really, truly triangulate again on your buyer and what's important to them. Now, we've done this for so many companies. We realize that many companies, like for instance, when we did this with AvidXchange, one of our clients, they had been in the same market already for 13 years, and they had never done a business buyer intelligence survey with their target audience. They did it with customers, but not with their prospects. So we helped them do that. And we found some tremendous things that they didn't know, which reprioritized everything that they were doing in terms of messaging. So regardless if you've been around a short period of time or a long period of time, a survey is really a great way for you to think about doing this. Okay. Here's a good question. Does this process lend itself more to SaaS or longer sales cycles such as enterprise? Good question. It's to both. So some of the processes you want to have today for, let's say, SaaS solutions is you want them to be as compact as possible. So as you know, I built some tremendous SaaS companies, software as a service companies, and what you've got to do is you've got to be very smart about taking out cost and accelerating the buyer's journey. On the other hand, if you're selling to the enterprise and you have a lot of people involved in the sales process and the evaluation, you also need to tend to all of them quickly too. So I would tell you this process we talk about today applies both to the quick transactional sales as well as to the strategic consultative sales as well. But good question, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, Gary. Okay, let's move on to another question now. This question is from Ashbury. Will you be sharing the slideshow presentation for future reference? Yes. So what we're going to do is after today's webinar, Dale McConnell, who's a partner with us, and myself, will be following up with everybody that joined today's webinar, and we'll share a copy of the presentation, the webinar, and of course, if you're looking for something more than that, we'll be happy to share that with you as well. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Next question is, how long does it take to implement a sales-driven website? Good question. So most companies have an existing website that you have today. What we found is that a lot of that information may be very valuable information that you have today, either in your repositories or in your website today, but it's not organized for the buyer. It's not organized in a way that makes it easy for the buyer to get what they want. So typically, to move from an informational to a sales-driven website is about a quarter, and we have systematized that process and figured out how to do that in a very prescriptive way to get you the results you're looking for. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So good questions, folks. Just keep them coming. Here's a question, and this came up during the poll. And this is from John. It says, what if we don't have the resources to do this work? Great question, John. So what I would tell you is that a lot of the companies we work with don't have the resources, and it's very typical. So when we first built On-Demand Advisors, we realized we needed to create our teams into 4 areas: strategy, marketing, sales enablement, and partnerships. And so when companies don't have the resources, we provide the resources. What good is a plan if you can't implement the plan? And so that's one of the keys that we have today is helping clients be successful to achieve the results. The way you do that is making sure you've got the resources to do it. Okay. So great questions, everyone. Thank you very much for those questions. Let's talk about next steps that you can apply. So as we said, we're going to be following up with you, and more than happy to discuss these revenue acceleration best practices for your business. We just have to set up a time to do that. And then what we're going to do is ensure that you're invited to our next webinar, which will be on May 21st. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to create your revenue acceleration playbook. So we're very excited about that. The playbook is really kind of a very important vehicle. And you can see what we're going to be walking you through: defining your strategic goals, creating your revenue engineering model, assessing your current state of operations, looking at gaps that you have, putting in place the recommendations, implementing the playbook, achieving your strategic goals, and so forth. So we look forward to you joining us for the next webinar in just about a month from now. Finally, here's our coordinates. Here's my email address. Here's Craig's. Dale will also be reaching out to you. And you can reach us by email. You can text us. You can call us. You can visit our website. We're here to help you succeed and collaborate for your success this year. And we appreciate all of you that have joined us for today's webinar. So on behalf of myself, Craig, Dale, and the entire On Demand Advisors team, thank you for joining us for this webinar today. And we look forward to helping you apply these 7 dramatic ways to increase revenue growth for your company.